Welcome, Linda Armstrong, and thank you for taking part in the Embassy of Switzerland's series on innovating in times of crisis. You are the global head of Respiratory Development Unit at Novartis. I am the ambassador of Switzerland to the United States of America. Let's talk about the challenging times we've been through and also about maybe how the disruption that happened before of COVID has helped us develop new methods and maybe even improve the way we are doing business. Novartis is a global healthcare company. It's actually one of the top 3 in the world, and it's based in Switzerland, and it provides solutions to address the evolving needs of patients worldwide. Tell me about the pharmaceutical industry you are a member of, both in Switzerland and in the US.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Ambassador, for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. Novartis, as you're absolutely right, Novartis is a large pharmaceutical company, and our single purpose is to reimagine medicine to improve and extend the lives of patients worldwide. It is based in Switzerland, but has global offices in many countries around the world, and as well as yes, many countries around the world. We have 60 manufacturing sites, as well as country pharmaceutical offices in over 100 different countries. So really a global company based in Switzerland.
And you do have a very strong presence in the United States of America, don't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. I work out of the East Hanover campus, where we have more than 5,000 employees. And then we have other employees throughout in field operations throughout the country. So Novartis has a very large footprint in the United States.
One of the most fascinating, if not touristic, sites to see in Switzerland is the Novartis campus in Basel, Switzerland, where on the campus that's the size of not even a tenth of Georgetown, you have, first of all, the GDP of quite a few countries that is produced, and a number of incredible scientists from all over the world congregating to create the pharmaceuticals of tomorrow. That must be quite a feeling to go there for the first time, isn't it?
Yes, I remember very clearly the first time I went to the Novartis campus in Basel. It is physically a beautiful campus. Just the number of award-winning architects who have created buildings there, but then also it is really a wonderful meeting of the minds. Really, some of the best scientists and physicians from around the world are attracted to work there. So I consider it a great privilege and honor to be part of Novartis.
Now, for the past 6 months, we've been confronted with this COVID crisis, and it didn't make our lives easier. It changed the way we are doing our business. Certainly for the diplomats, it has been a steep learning curve. Indeed, how was it for Novartis? How did you change the way you operate worldwide during this crisis?
Yes, so when the pandemic hit, we had 2 priorities: our people and the patients, and that's includes patients who are in clinical trials. Starting with the people, as I mentioned before, we have offices in countries across the world. The most important thing was making sure that people could work safely, either in their homes for those of them who could, or for those who had to go into work, to make sure that they were able to work in a socially distanced, safe environment. Novartis has spent a lot of time communicating with our colleagues to make sure that they feel supported. And even as countries are starting to open up, we've moved to a distributed working environment. So we've empowered colleagues to think about how they work best and where they work best. So if they feel they need to come into the office, we have a safe way for them to do that. But if they feel that they can work from home and that works with, children trying to Zoom learn, or, a spouse that is also trying to work from home, then that is fine as well. So that's the people. The patients.
But let's stay with your people. What about the industrial production facilities? Because there is no working from home, is there?
No, you're right. You can't make the pills from your kitchen. So we spent a lot of time making sure that workers could be socially distant, that they, at the very beginning, that they had personal protective equipment, that we decrease the number of people who were not necessary on campus, so that people could stay further apart, and as well as things like making sure that there was access to temperature, or the people who were symptomatic were encouraged to stay home, and that people received some extra pay to support things that they had to take care of within their homes to allow them to come into work.
Oh, I see. Okay, and sorry for interrupting you, but now for the patients.
Not at all. Yes. So for the patients, as you mentioned, I'm part of the development community. So we have tens of thousands of patients enrolled in over 500 clinical trials. So you can imagine at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of concern with, do we stop our trials? Where do we stop them? What sites? And as it happens, in 2017, we had developed a digital platform called Sense that gave us the real-time tracking ability to look at every study, every country, every site, and track every patient. And that enabled us to determine, where the pandemic was the worst. Should we close down those sites? Where can we start opening up sites after these countries had started reopening? So that was very helpful, and we had a centralized group that made those decisions.
Mm-hmm. You, Linda, are the global head of the Respiratory Development Unit. It must have been the heydays for your unit.
Oh my gosh! Well,
it must have been incredible.
If you told me last year that I would live in a world where my family, none of whom are in medicine or in pharma, all understand what a phase 3 trial is, all understand what acute respiratory distress syndrome is, I would have said you're lying. So really, yes, this pandemic has put respiratory front and center. And Novartis has done a lot, both to help our patients who are already in trials to make sure that they could safely stay on. And that included things like having home delivery of study medications, or doing nursing visits from home, doing remote monitoring, remote safety collection. And then also we've started a number of initiatives within Novartis to try to combat the pandemic. And I'm happy to go into those in greater detail if you'd like.
Well, please do.
Oh, great. Well, just as part of the pharmaceutical community, of course, Novartis has collaborated with other pharma as well as external organizations as part of the COVID-19 Therapeutics Accelerator. And that is run by the Gates Foundation as well as Wellcome Trust. It's a collaborative research effort. In addition, we started 5 clinical trials to look at therapies, both investigational therapies, as well as therapies that are improved for other indications, to see if they could improve the outcome of patients with COVID or decrease its severity. Those studies are still on. Well, 4 of the 5 studies are still ongoing. The 5th study was a study of hydroxychloroquine, which was stopped back in June, based on data and based on just an inability to recruit for reasons.
We might have heard something about
Yeah, you may have heard of hydroxychloroquine.
Details. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The other studies are still ongoing, including a study of JAK inhibitor, ruxolitinib, that we're doing in conjunction with company Incyte, as well as canakinumab, an anti-IL-1 beta antagonist that we're running as well. Those studies should be reading out in the December-January timeframe. We also have 2 investigational products, so products that are not approved yet, but are were being studied for other indications, but we think that they interrupt pathways that will help treat patients with COVID as well.
So, okay, you're the first representative of the pharmaceutical industry I interview on this series, and of course I'm not going to ask you to make a prediction when this madness will be over. But let's hope that your joint forces of all the, and we are extremely grateful to all the researchers and all the specialists who are trying to make our lives normal again. But As an industrial company of global size, you must also have been confronted with supply chain management problems. And mind you, it's probably just the beginning, because once COVID will be over, the trade wars that have been set off lately will go on for decades, if you ask me. So how did you deal with the supply chain management problems?
Yes, so we also have a very intricate digital platform for our supply chain. And, as I mentioned, 60 manufacturing sites around the world. So working with some duplication, but also a lot of integration, we have been able to keep the supply chain, intact, and expect to be able to do that moving into the future. But you're right, it is a great challenge. Novartis has not just small molecules or pills, but also biologics, gene therapies, cell therapies, radioligand therapies. So the breadth of manufacturing complexity, as well as the different vendors and suppliers, is extensive. And of course, we have we spend a lot of work trying to prioritize that and making sure that patients get the medications that they need.
There is a lot of talks these days of reshoring, repatriating production. Could you maybe tell our American listeners how strong your industrial presence is in the US?
So yes,
and R&D presence.
Absolutely. So we have a very strong R&D presence in the U.S. Yeah, as I mentioned, it's one of the 3 global research and development sites. We have a site in Cambridge with our early development. Again, some of the finest scientific minds are located there, and as well as in East Hanover, where we also have a large research presence. We currently, about 30% of all of our clinical trial patients are from the United States, and actually we have a goal to have more than that. We also have many of our manufacturing sites are in the United States. So the US is very important to Novartis, and vice versa. Novartis is an incredibly important partner to patients in the United States.
It's very important for me to underline this, because I'm always trying to tell people who may not understand the very basics of free trade, that free trade is a mutually beneficial relationship. Both sides win. It's not a win-lose or lose-win, it's a win-win situation. And companies like Novartis, and this is something that we really want to praise Novartis for, are actually investing gigantic sums into R&D in the United States of America, which shows that the brain drain is not just, from the US to somewhere, but in that case, it's a brain drain from scientists from all over the world, but over Switzerland, through the United States of America. And this is really extremely important. Now, which are the strengths of Novartis that, according to you, have helped you overcome the challenge of COVID-19?
Yes, I think there are a number of things that have helped us overcome some of these challenges. One is really a focus on collaboration within the company, and a focus on our culture. So we embarked on a very intense culture journey a few years ago, focusing on keeping all colleagues inspired, curious, and engaged, empowering people to understand what they need to do and giving them the freedom to do it. So you can imagine, when we're all working from our homes, from our children's bedrooms, having that ability to stay connected, to understand your purpose, and to be able to work effectively and independently, that really helped us get through. And that purpose, I talked about the 5 trials that we started. Generally, I always think of a clinical trial like a child. It takes 9 months to get it. From the time you think you want to do it to the time you get the first patient enrolled, it usually takes 9 months. In this pandemic, we got those trials up in about less than 9 weeks, about 6 weeks. So we really just it enabled people to think freely, to simplify processes, not to sacrifice quality in any way, but to really drive what is essential to get these studies up and running. And so
that's a very interesting point. Let me just dwell on this for a second, because everyone assumes that one of the main lessons that we will have drawn from this crisis will be that we will reduce our carbon imprint, because we will fly less, because there is so much we can do virtually, though we also know the limitations of a virtual world where it's sometimes nice to have a beer together and to be able to freely discuss and to connect and on a human basis and not just through a computer.
Yeah.
But in fact, what you're saying is that you have improved your procedures. It's not just that you might reduce your carbon imprint. You have also improved your procedures. You've made them leaner and meaner.
Exactly. And yes, and we may not be able to. I mean, people were, again, very engaged. I mean, people were on Zoom calls 7 days a week, just because we all understood the urgency. Not all of those things will be able to are sustainable in the long term, but some of our simplification processes absolutely are being codified now, so they will help us move forward.
And do you think that the regulatory authorities will follow? Because that's probably one of the main challenges you are facing. Because you may simplify your processes, but if there are requirements, clear legal requirements by FDA or others, what do you do?
Yes, well, you're right. The regulators were also very engaged. We had 1 week where we talked to them 3 times in a week, which, very unusual. So of course, it's not sustainable for them either. But I think this spirit of collaboration, working together for a common purpose, I think will only help us moving forward.
So we are always trying to look for the silver lining on the horizon. What's the silver lining for you? What is really the surprisingly positive aspect or lesson that you can draw from this crisis?
Yeah, for me, I think there are two. I think one is around the sense of purpose. If we ever had a doubt that our industry was important to the world, this answered that question. The pharmaceutical industry will have a huge role in bringing our world back to a state that we remember. I think another silver lining is around. It's not so much a silver lining, but it's shining a spotlight for me in the United States on healthcare disparities. So, COVID, we saw, has disproportionately affected communities of color. And I think that shining this light on it will lead to new thinking and new solutions, so that we can improve that as well.
That is definitely a silver lining on the horizon. And frankly, if you listen to the words of the Surgeon General, Mr. Jerome Adams, he can't stop emphasizing how important prevention is and the general health of the population is once you're confronted with a pandemic. And if there is one lesson that the healthcare system in the US, and not only in the US, can draw from this pandemic, is that by improving the general health of the population, you reduce the number of casualties in a spectacular manner. And I think that's a very, very positive lesson to draw. So, absolutely. Linda Armstrong, thank you so much for this fascinating talk. All the best in your fight to bring us back to normal life. And again, I'm not going to ask the question about a prediction. When is it going to be back to normal?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador. It's really been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.